as you're explaining more and more of these incredibly time-consuming processes, it becomes very clear that delegation is actually a great
Yeah,
idea.
it is. I mean, if you're focused, this takes roughly 8 hours or maybe less to do. So I'd rather pay someone to do that. And, I was on my way out flying over to London for this one. So I was like, I'll just have someone else do this so I don't have to worry about it in the hotel room or, stressing out, on the day I'm flying out, just preparing the last sessions. I was like, I'd rather pay someone for a day to do this and just be relaxed and just pack my bags and get to the airport early. Yeah, there are so many of these types of processes that just it's so this is why people have assistants, why they're especially bigger studios have composer assistants. Imagine doing this for a TV show. I mean, sometimes you can also book someone at the scoring stage to do that, but they're usually much, much more expensive. Some engineers are really nice and they will have some kind of, assistant who will do that for you. But eventually you will get to the point where you're just gonna have to do this and you're not gonna, get around it, unfortunately.
We have someone looking to learn Pro Tools in depth. And other than just downloading it and having it go, is there anything you'd recommend online or any books or guides that you have found particularly helpful if you wanted to do like a deep dive into Pro Tools?
I usually just watch the stuff that comes from the developer.
Mhm.
I mean, these processes I've just learned from being an assistant, but I'm by no means a Pro Tools wizard. I just know what I need to know because I don't use it on a daily basis. If you really want to make that your main DAW, I would probably look into maybe taking a lesson with a mix engineer because they usually know everything about this, or doing an internship at a recording studio because they're going to know everything about this too. But yeah, normally I just use the tools that come with it, the manual and the tutorial videos that the developer usually posts themselves. Back when I learned it, like way back on Pro Tools 7 or something, back when it wasn't even owned by Avid, it came with like a tutorial CD or DVD with like a 10-part course on it. So I'm pretty sure they have something like that on YouTube or on their website as well, I would assume.
So much of learning any DAW really, and including Pro Tools, is having a person to really explain it to you the way that it's used in the real world. There's books and manuals and videos, and they only get you so far, and then you need a person to come and really talk to you about the application of it like you're doing with us today. So, well, you know a heck of a lot. And we have a question in the chat about hiring someone. Speaking of delegation, what would you say? Do you have anything you can tell us about the going rate for hiring someone for something like this? And then is there an
Mhm.
applicable union rate?
This is not a union job. Like if you're unless you're a music editor and you do this, sometimes they would do this. It's not a union job. Composers don't have a union. The going rate for this is around $20 per hour, I think, because it's kind of a skill that can be explained in, what was it, half an hour?
I don't know that I would feel confident in this. It's definitely a skill, but I see what you're saying. There's also a repetitive
Yeah.
element to it once you get
Yeah,
going.
exactly. Like you're probably gonna mess up the first two sessions, but then once you've done two, you're like, okay, I got this now. And then you
Yeah.
do it 70 more times, and then you're like, okay, I never want to do this again. Then you're over it. But yeah, I think the going rate is $20 an hour. At least that's what I pay and what I've been paid. I think the highest I've ever been paid for this job is 22 per hour to do this. And that was a more complicated situation where I had to also print the stems in real time into Pro Tools. It was an old setup. But yeah, that kind of seems to be the going rate for this kind of thing, I think.
That's helpful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, especially considering, this would be like a junior assistant task, I would say. But considering that an intern should be getting around $15 an hour, which is the current minimum wage, I think, in a lot of states, coastal states. I think ours is currently 14 in Los Angeles, but will be 15 if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. But so that would be what you would be paying an intern or someone literally coming out of college knowing nothing practical yet, or someone who's still in college. So, for something like this, 2022 seems like, adequate.
Yeah, I think that seems like a fair number. It really is so dependent on the marketplace and all that, but
It's dependent on the studio. I mean, I know people who are doing this for $12 an hour, and I'm like, that's not really acceptable. But then again, what are you going to do if the composer is being douchey and doesn't, offer you more? Then take it or leave it.
yes, we need to have a whole nother session on how to deal with
Yeah.
douchey bosses, whether they're a composer or not. But
You have a lot of composers that will just pay you, 14 an hour or something, but they will expect you to do orchestration and copying and session prep and all these varied things, where you're like, okay, but you're asking quite a bit for, $14 an hour. If I'm getting a Starbucks or McDonald's type hourly rate for stuff that is pretty highly specialized stuff, then we got to ask ourselves where our pricing is going.
Yes, yes. It's always a delicate conversation talking about
Yeah.
money. Thank you for sharing that. I know we all appreciate it.
If you're ever my intern, you will be paid, and you will be paid $15 an hour, because that is fair.
Interestingly enough, we have someone in the chat who is supposed to be starting an internship in the LA area in September.
Mhm.
And they haven't mentioned any money. Would you recommend that she brings it up or ignores it, or how
I
would
mean-
you handle that?
A lot of internships do not pay, which I think is wrong. If they're doing it for college credit, this is how most composers get out of it. They just gonna say, it's for college credit, so we don't have to pay you, which I disagree with, but sure. That's the legality of it, because technically they can't make you work without paying you. So the way they don't pay you is, the only exception to that is if you are doing the internship for college credit. And so that's how a lot of composers set up their internships, so that you get college credit for being there. And so they can basically kind of put you to work without paying you. And they're often saying, well, it's just running errands and just making coffee and this and that. But I'm like, if I have food delivered to my doorstep, I pay the person, right? That is
Sure.
a paid labor. So why are we assuming that for interns that is not paid labor?
Right.
So
I have had 6 internships, most of them while I was in school, and then one outside of school. And granted, they were not under composers; they were for like record labels and film studios and stuff like that, on the more, I guess, business or administrative end of things. And I was never paid because I was getting college credit. And for the one I did outside of college, I actually registered for a class at Santa Monica College just so I could show that I was getting credit, and
Yeah.
they wouldn't have to pay me. It's a thorny kind of thing. And I think that's come under fire more recently.
Mhm. I'm part of a group that is it's called Teammates, and we're trying to make this a standard. And some composers have been listening. Some composers are now actually doing paid internships. So we've been very vocal about this, that look, it doesn't hurt you. You're making millions on each project. It doesn't hurt you to pay someone $15 an hour for a couple hours a week. But it means the world to them to actually get paid to show up.
And as for our friend in the chat, she says, I think he thinks I'm doing it for college credit, but I'm not. That might be worth pointing out to your future employer.
Yeah, you can just ask about it, or if there's an assistant, maybe ask the assistant about it, because they're going to know what the deal is, So maybe make that your point person.
Yeah. It's tricky, sticking up for yourself.
Yeah.
And advocating for yourself is it's tricky, but good luck.
It is, especially if you're right out of college or something and you don't really have, credits or work to show for yourself or experience to show, then it's very difficult to make a point about payment, because then you're just happy to have a foot in the door. But at the same time, I'm like, it's not on them, it's on us as composers and hiring entities to do better. It's not on them to fight for scraps when really they're in a position where they don't really have leverage, you know,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
they know it and we know it. And so some of us are taking advantage of that. And it's on us to stop taking advantage of that. So let's not put the onus on the people who are taken advantage of, because they have no power. There's nothing they can do.
Sure. That's a good point. Yeah. Thank you for that.